Hey everybody, welcome to part 5 of the video series in preparing for my first NRL22 match. This is going to be the final part of this little series that I made, and I'm sitting down here at the computer reviewing some of the footage that I got from my GoPro on the day of the match. And I figured I might as well just narrate over the footage that I got and just share some of the experiences and some of the lessons that I learned. It was a lot of fun. Quickly before I get into that part of the video, I just have the rifle here just so you guys have something to look at if I'm on this video. I don't usually have my rifle on the computer table, obviously, but the match itself was a lot of fun. The CZ457 shot really well. Me, on the other hand, definitely need some practice, but it was a lot of fun. It's just as much fun as anyone's gonna tell you you're gonna have. So if you're on the fence about trying out one of these NRL22 style matches, definitely just go ahead and give it a shot. You don't need a setup like this here. I built this rifle specifically to shoot these matches and hopefully acquire better shooting skills in this discipline. But you can go in, there's some guys with just production 1022s and cheap Marlows and stuff, and everyone's having a blast, so it's a really good time. Big shout out to the more experienced shooters who were there because they were very willing to lend a hand to the newer shooters and the first timers like myself. Gave a lot of tips and some of their knowledge that you just wouldn't know unless you are a more experienced shooter. So that was really fun. The community of shooters at my club, at least, was really welcoming, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm about 2 weeks out from shooting this match. I just haven't had time to review the footage and to do video editing. So right after the match, I kind of jotted down some notes in terms of what I learned that day. So I'll kind of go through that list, and anything in the footage here that I don't get through in terms of the list of things that I learned, I'll just quickly go over the remaining after the footage. So also, just to clear some things up, I've been using the term NRL22 for the style of matches that I have been preparing for, just because everyone knows what you're talking about when you say NRL22. But technically, the organization that does the 22 matches at my club is a Canadian organization called Outlaw Rimfire Precision Series, or ORPS, which is part of the CRPS Canadian Rimfire Precision Series. But for all intents and purposes, it's the same thing as the NRL22. Each month they release 5 courses, 5 stages for that month's course of fire. And everybody across the country that's participating will shoot the same course of fire, so it's very even and fair. Obviously, things like weather and stuff like that won't be the same across the entire country, but everyone's shooting the same stages for the course of fire that month. And again, they provide 5 stages out to 100 yards, which is really inclusive for a lot of the ranges that don't have the further distances to shoot, a couple hundred yards with, which I think is actually really cool. And then they leave it up to the match director to give any bonus stages just for the shooters to have a go at. So for my range, we shoot on a 200-yard range for these matches, so the bonus stages can go out to 200 yards, but all the ORPS matches for the month are within the 100 yards. So for the January match here, we had, of course, the 5 standard ORPS stages out to 100, and then we had 3 bonus stages made by the match director that went out to, I think it was 100 and either 150 or 175 was the longest distance we shot for this match, but we can go out to 200 if the match director chooses to. So that's pretty cool. And I'm probably still going to just use the term NRL22 just because everyone knows what that means if you're not in Canada. I will say I do have to revisit some of the data I got from the very brief data gathering session. That was part 2, I believe, in this video series. Out past 100 yards, I was really struggling to get any hits, so I definitely have to revisit that. 22 LR cartridge is pretty finicky when it comes to temperature, so the day I was testing my ammo was quite cold, and the day of the match was actually a little bit warmer. It was hovering around 1 or 2 degrees, so that might have part to do with it, and certain brands of 22 ammo do better or worse in different temperatures. So I'm going to do a little bit more lot testing for different ammo types and different weather conditions, and hopefully I can kind of hone in onto a specific brand that performs well in the CZ for some colder temperature stuff. Some of the stages here, whatever the opposite of cleaning a stage is, that's what I did. I dirtied it, I guess. I got a big whopping 0 hits on 2 stages, but still had a lot of fun and learned a lot. The weather this day was pretty miserable. I mentioned it was a little bit warmer, but it was snowing very heavily throughout the entire match, which kind of sucks because the snow, as soon as it hits anything, whether it's you or your equipment, it basically just melts. So it's basically just raining on you. The visibility was also really poor because of the snow through the scopes and spotting scopes. The lenses of the scopes just got completely covered, and even though you're wiping them off, the cloth you're wiping off your scopes with eventually got saturated, and then you're just kind of, you know, rubbing water around on your lens. So it was hard to see. The last two stages I shot with a very blurry sight picture, and you couldn't really tell your hits either to adjust some of your shots, because as soon as it goes past the target, there was no splash. The round just kind of disappeared. So it was a little bit frustrating, but that's just how it works. You know, weather conditions is what it is, and still good experience. So let's go to the video footage. I'm just going to narrate over it as I watch it myself, and any of the things that I learned, I kind of wrote a list down. Anything that's not covered in the footage, I'll just quickly go over afterwards. The first stage of the day that I shot was called cardio ladder workout. If you watch part 3, I believe, of the video series, this was actually one of the stages I had practiced at my own house, because I had an A-frame ladder to kind of work in a dry run to see how I'd move between each of the different rungs and how I was going to use my barricade bag. There's 2 targets for the stage. T1 was a 2-inch target at 50 yards and T2 was a 4-inch target at 100 yards. So how the stage worked was shooter engages T1, so that's the 2-inch target at 50. One shot off each rung, working up from the bottom to top, up to the 5th rung, and then at the 5th rung you would shoot again at the T2 target, 4-inch target at 100 yards, and then do the same thing all the way down. So T1 5 times, and then T2 5 times going down in each rung. And again, I had done this at home, so I thought I was going to do pretty well. I ended up only getting 20 points or 2 hits, and you'll see I did a very crucial mistake even before the stage started. This was the first stage of the day, and I had just verified by 0 on another range, and I think I shot maybe just 4 or 5 rounds. However, I had 2 mags in my pocket. One was the mag with the Anarchy Outdoors 3-round extension on it, and that was the one I was going to run for the stages. So that one I had topped up. I made sure it was topped up. It had 13 rounds in it. Can you guess what happened? Obviously, I started the round with the wrong mag in the gun, so I only had, I think, 5 shots, and you'll see when I get up to the 5th rung, I go to take a shot and nothing happens because obviously my mag is empty. So I had to do kind of an emergency panic reload, which was not the best thing for my first stage because I'm already kind of pumped up on adrenaline. I had made sure before shooting the stage that everything was set up, you know, my scope was good to go, my parallax was adjusted, my turrets were set back to 0, my scope lens cap covers were open, and everything was good to go, safety off. Obviously the bolt was still back, but I felt very prepared. The one crucial thing I was missing obviously was a full mag, duh. So here I go. I am happy to say that the very first shot I took at my first match, I did get a hit. So good start to the day.
Get back. Get back.
My magazine hiccup, which you're about to see here when I get to the top rung. I go to take a shot and nothing happens. And at first I thought maybe I just kind of short stroked the bolt, which is weird for a 22. I reinserted my mag and shot again. It didn't work. Then I realized it's empty, so I just dumped it and got my other mag out and did a quick reload. But at this point, my adrenaline's going crazy because I was already nervous to begin with, and my heart was pumping harder than ever before for a shooting match anyway. And I had never experienced this, but my crosshair was actually moving off target every time my heart was beating, which it was beating pretty fast, so my crosshair was kind of going crazy. And the reticle was jumping around everywhere, which I had never really experienced because obviously all I've ever done for precision shooting is just bench shoot or shoot from prone when I'm nice and relaxed. So this was a really cool start to the day to show me how dynamic these stages can be and how I have to learn to control my body to not have like a mini panic attack like I did. I knew, because I had done this at my house, that I knew I had to do the transitions pretty fast, but at the same time that wasn't the way to go because I really rushed it, and obviously I didn't get as many hits as I probably could have. So I think it's probably better to take your time and really steady your shot rather than just try and blast through a stage without running out of time.
Okay. Don't miss the flag in there.
Disappointed because, again, this was a stage I had practiced at home, and I crucially forgot to put a topped up magazine in my rifle before shooting, so kind of stupid on my part. But let's go to stage 2. So stage 2 was called Stand and Deliver. This was an unsupported stage with sling only, and this stage has 2 targets again. T1 is a 3-inch target at 25 yards, so pretty close, and T2 is a 6-inch target at 100 yards. Now this was a hit to advance stage. Once you hit T1 with 5 hits, you would proceed to T2 with your remaining rounds. So you would start at the 25-yard 3-inch target. 5 hits later, you would transition to the T2 6-inch target at 100 yards. This was actually the stage, funny enough, that I was most worried for, because I don't do much offhand shooting for precision at all. And practicing at home, my trigger press when I was just holding the gun offhand, I was really shaky, so I was pretty nervous for it. After the first stage and my horrible adrenaline rush, I managed to calm myself down. I do a lot of sports, not competitively, but I do like little tournaments or competitions here and there. So I kind of know how to control my body, and if I'm feeling panicked, I have methods of dealing with that. So I managed to kind of calm down, so the heart rate thing wasn't an issue. And what's funny is this stage was the one I was most concerned for, but it's actually the stage I shot the best for the entire day. I got 7 hits. I can't remember how many shots I took, but 7 hits, even if I shot all 10, is really good, for me anyway, for a standing stage, and I'm really happy with that. The Magpul RLS sling worked really nicely, so I'm definitely going to be using that for unsupported stages in the future. You can see here I was just adjusting my scope, making sure my parallax and everything was adjusted, and I decided to dial for this stage. Since you're not transitioning between the 2 targets, you only have one transition out to the 100-yard target. I figured I would dial and adjust my parallax when the time came. I actually don't really know what happened here, but you're going to see halfway through the stage I had to reload again, and I'm not really sure what happened with that, because I was really careful to top up all my mags afterwards, but who knows, maybe I lost count or something again.
Impact.
So here I'm trying to use good shooting technique, standing shooting technique when you use your skeletal support. So it looks kind of funky, but you're trying to rest your elbow kind of on your hip that sticks out a bit, so you're using as little muscles as possible, because muscles fatigue, but your skeletal structure is much stronger and gives you a good platform to work off of. The sling, the RLS sling, that is wrapped around my bicep there, kind of helps you pull the gun into your shoulder, so you can also preload it forward a little bit. So I got my 5 hits here, and I'm adjusting my scope now to the 100-yard target, which is a little bit awkward when the sling's wrapped around your arm, because you can see your workspace for your scope is kind of stuck in. And again, I don't really know what happened here, but I did have to do a reload, I remember, and then I ended up getting 2 hits on the 100-yard target.
Oh, okay.
I guess I had a failure to eject or something there. I'm not quite sure what happened, but I decided to just do a reload. And I knew I was running out of time, so I kind of rushed my last shot, and I ended up actually getting a hit right when he said time.
That was right on the edge. Are you counting that? I'll give you a 7 as far as I'm concerned.
The RO was nice enough though to count that hit, so I ended up getting 7 hits on the stage, which I'm really happy with. The stage that I was most concerned for, I ended up getting the best score the entire day. So that was the standing stage. Okay, so the third stage was the stage that I actually didn't get any footage of me shooting it because someone stood in front of the GoPro. Not a big deal. I'm just going to show footage of another shooter shooting the stage. This is actually the match director who's shooting it now. His name is Tom. Great guy. Really well planned out event and well coordinated. So this stage was called Let's Be Seated. There's a chair that you shoot off of. There was 4 targets, a 1-inch target, a 3/4 inch target, a 1/2 inch target, and a 1/4 inch target, all at 25 yards. It was unsupported though, so no bipod bags. You were allowed to use your sling, but most people weren't running the sling because on the chair you can kind of prop your elbows down on your knees and kind of get some support that way. But you're basically just sitting on the chair and shooting at the targets, but you have to go in order. So 1 inch, 3/4, 1/2, 1/4. You must hit to advance and you can't miss. So if you hit T1 and then you hit T2 and then you miss when you're hitting T3, you have to go back to T1 and then try it again. If you do manage to get to T4, so you hit T1, T2, T3, T4, you can choose to keep hitting T4 over and over until the time expires or you run out of rounds. Most people didn't even try for T4. If you got T3, most people stopped. And a lot of people actually just stopped at T2, including myself. You'll see here, I can't remember how Tom did, but it was a pretty funky stage. This was probably my least favorite stage. I ended up just getting up to T2 and stopping. I tried to go for T3. I can't remember if it was once or twice, but I missed T3, so I had to go back to T1, and then the last time I tried it, I just stopped at T2 to hold my points. So I got 20 points, but some people got all the way up to T4, which is pretty impressive. Okay, so the next stage, stage 4, was called tiring 2-stack. We were supposed to have 2 stacks of tires, but at my range we leave all or some of the barricades and stuff we shoot off of outside just in the snow, and the 2 tires we were supposed to use for the second stack were actually frozen to the ground under like 6 or 8 inches of ice. So there's no way we were going to chip that out. That's there till spring. We were able to excavate 2 tires, so we only had 1 stack, and that's kind of what we used, but the stage did call for 4 tires. We were only able to extract 2 out of the frozen ground. But anyway, there's 2 targets. T1 is a 5-inch target at 50 yards, and T2 is a 1.5-inch target at 100 yards. The stage had the tires stacked so that one was lying flat on the ground and the other one was propped up inside the other tire so that you're looking through the tire at the targets. On the engage command, a shooter adopts a position with a rifle shooting from inside the standing tire, and you would engage the 5-inch target at 50 yards until it's hit. So it was hit to advance. Once you hit T1 once, you would transition to T2, which again is the 1.5-inch target at 100 yards. Once you hit T2 once, you would change your position from inside the tire stack to on top of the tire stack. And same thing, you had to hit T1 to advance to T2. Once you hit T2 on top of the tires, you would transition to a prone mat, which was beside the tire stack. And same thing, you would hit T1, T2 prone, and then if you were to hit that, you would go back on top of the tire and then inside the tire, same thing. Some people actually got stuck just shooting through the tire, so the first part of the stage, they couldn't even make 2 shots. And some people got up to the top of the tire stack and had trouble hitting the 100-yard target. Again, 1.5-inch, 100-yard target. And I'm not sure if I got really lucky, but I was actually the only person in my squad to make it off the top of the tire stack and into the prone position. So at this point in the day, everything was just soaked in water. Obviously, we were closing our lens caps between each stage. I don't know what happened here, but I forgot to open my lens cap, and you'll see I quickly realized that, and I go to flip it up, and the entire lens cap actually just pops off, so I just throw it to the side, which is no big deal. But again, you just got to check all your equipment to make sure it's good to go when you're about to shoot a stage. The first position here inside the tire stack was a little bit awkward because you had to arch your back quite a bit to see through your scope. But again, I managed to hit T1 and then hit T2. and then transition onto the top of the tire stack. The top of the tire was actually a lot more difficult than I thought it would be, because since it's just sitting inside the other tire, it rocks back and forth quite a bit, so you can't put any sort of weight into your gun because you're just going to tip the tire over. So it was a little bit more difficult than I thought, but I managed to hit T2 again, and I was able to shoot in the prone position, which not many people were able to do in my squad. In fact, I was the only person in my squad to actually transition into the prone position for this stage. I never really thought it was a big deal, but after shooting some of these stages with, I really do understand why some people like the Harris bipods for competition, because when you're under the clock, every second matters, and deploying the Atlas legs one by one does take a little bit more time, and it just stresses you out every, ever so slightly more. So I totally understand now why some people like the super fast deployment of the Harris bipod legs. 5 hits in this stage, I'm quite happy with. After this, my stages really went downhill. So this was basically my last good stage I shot through the day.
Matt got 5.
So just so I don't keep this video going on too long, I'm gonna just kind of rush through the bonus stages. The 5 stages I just went over were the official ORPS stages, and the bonus stages that my match director created for January's Course of Fire were all beyond 100 yards, but within 175 yards. And I did really poorly on them, to be totally honest. 2 of the bonus stages I got a whopping 0 hits, 0 points, and the last one on the tank trap, I think I only got 1 or 2 hits. So I'm just gonna kind of play a little compilation of some of the stages, but basically I do need to revisit some of my data past 100 yards, and it really didn't help the fact that it was snowing so bad that I couldn't see where my rounds were going in order to adjust my shot for the next one. So I was basically just shooting into into the direction of the target and hoping for the best. Still a good experience overall. There are a bunch of things that I jotted down here that I still want to go over, and just things that I learned. So we're just going to go one by one, and I might put something on the screen so you guys have something to watch as I go through these things. But these are all things that I learned during the day, both in terms of my shooting and the equipment that I was using that day. So some of the really big things that I'm going to definitely try and keep in mind is to always dial back to 0 after each stage. And then before the stage you're going to fire, the next time, dial it into whatever target you need to. This is just to keep things a little bit straighter in your head. There were some stages where I forgot to dial back to 0, and since this scope, the Diamondback Tactical, doesn't have a 0 stop, it kind of freaked me out because at one stage I wasn't hitting anything, and I thought I had maybe dialed this back to 0 the wrong way. So I asked the RO if I could just engage a 50-yard target to just verify my 0, and luckily I did turn the turret back the correct way, but I guess it just didn't give me an excuse as to why I wasn't hitting anything. But definitely turn your turrets back to 0 after each stage. It just saves you from a little mini panic attack in the future. Always do kind of like a mental checklist of things to get ready before the match, obviously, or before each stage I should say. Obviously the first stage I shot, I didn't even top up my mag, which was a huge mistake. So things to go through would be obviously the 0, making sure your parallax is adjusted to the first target you're going to be shooting at, and then your lens covers are flipped up. I saw so many guys that they start a stage with their lens covers closed because it was basically, snowing, raining on us basically, and everyone closed their lens caps between stages, but so many guys forgot to open them and just wasted precious time setting up their scope in order to start shooting. Next thing here, always top off the mag. Obviously we already talked about that. That was a huge fail, and definitely learned from that. watch other shooters, both amateurs as well as more experienced shooters, because you're going to learn from both sides of that spectrum. Always carry a spare mag is the next thing I have here. That's a big one too. You never know what's going to happen. If you have a magazine that only holds 10 rounds and anything happens to one of the rounds, it's bad, or you have to drop it, or you have a malfunction, it's nice to just have another mag topped up ready to go. So I always had an extra one in my pocket, which helped me in 2 of the stages, as you saw there. Here's a big one. The next one I have written down here is the round extension. That Anarchy Outdoors 3-round extension is actually not that great to shoot the matches with, and let me explain to you why. So the train of thought I had was that I would run the magazine with the 3-round extension on it for all these stages, because if I had to drop a round, I would have extras in there and I wouldn't have to reload. Now, that aspect of it works, but the other aspect of it I think is bad enough where I'm not going to run the extension anymore for these matches. And that's the fact that these are self-RO'd, so within your squad you will change around your spotters and your RO, which means there's no one really counting your rounds for you. And if you have 13 rounds in your magazine, you're going to be shooting, and then when it gets to maybe 8 or 9 rounds, you're going to think to yourself, you know, did I shoot 10 rounds? And you're trying to think, you're wasting your time, you're asking people if you shot 10 rounds. Obviously no one's counting for you. And obviously I want to be honest, I don't want to take advantage of the fact that I have 3 extra rounds and just shoot 13 rounds in a stage. So the last stage I shot, actually, I lost track of my round count using that 3-round extension, and I asked my RO, I said, were you counting my rounds? And he said no, which is totally fair. So I said, you know what, I think I shot 10, I'm just going to stop. That was the last stage for the day, so I actually went to take out the rounds from the magazine. I had 5 left, so I had only shot 8 rounds, and I had 2 left I could have shot. But since I got mixed up and no one was counting my rounds, I ended up, you know, finishing the stage with 2 less rounds. So because of that, I'm actually just going to use my 10-round magazines to start all the stages off with, and then if I need to do a reload, I can have whatever other mag in my pocket. Again, I don't want to take advantage of the system, because people assume that if you have a 10-round mag in these rimfire guns that it only holds 10 rounds, and I don't want to approach these stages with a 13-round mag and have anyone suspect me of trying to use more rounds than I should be. So it just kind of helps you keep track of things. I'm not going to be using that that mag extension for these matches going forward. Bring a lens cloth. This is a big one. In part 4 of this video series, I showed what I was going to bring to the match, and one thing I actually didn't show on video was a lens cloth. Luckily, I actually had one in my bag. It was actually my camera bag that wasn't in the video. That came into play a lot because the snow, as I mentioned earlier on, was very wet. As soon as it touched anything, it just turned to water. And since you're holding your rifle vertical when you're waiting for the stages to start, there's snow falling onto your lens. And I was constantly wiping down both my scope as well as my glasses. But the lens cloth, as big as it was, it's one of those vortex lens cloths that come with scopes. It eventually got saturated, and wiping things down just kind of moved the water around. So I'm definitely going to have more lens cloths in my bags for more inclement weather. I was surprised with how little I actually used the bipod. I thought the bipod was going to be a very crucial system on the gun, but for these NRL22 style stages that I was shooting, I could have done all of them without the bipod. The only stage I think I needed the bipod for was the one I went prone, and yeah, it just really surprised me that the bipod wasn't actually as crucial as the shooting bag. The shooting bag by far, besides a rifle, was the most crucial piece of equipment you could have to shoot these stages off of. All the other stages, even if you're shooting off the milk crates and buckets and stuff, could have been done without the bipod, just using shooting bags. So that was really surprising to me. It's still good to have a good bipod setup on your gun, but the amount we didn't use it really surprised me. Speaking of shooting bags, the shooting bags that I made, that I showed in part 3, I believe, worked out, or pardon me, part 4, worked out really nicely. The fabric I used was a 1000 denier Cordura, which had a waterproof backing on it, which kept them dry. So I actually saw the water basically bead off the bags, and they didn't get saturated with moisture, or they didn't become super heavy or anything like that. After the match, I just put them in my basement to dry out, and within a few hours they were completely dry. So that's really cool. In terms of the actual design, they worked very well. I have been in the process of developing a little bit more of a refined bag to use in future matches, but they both worked great. I like the fact that I made them myself because I can kind of tweak the design here and there. But all in all, the shooting bags that I made did work very well, and I will be designing some more versions of them in the near future. Another thing that I didn't use much was the shooting mat. What ended up happening was any stage that needed a shooting mat, someone would just provide the shooting mat and everyone would use it. So I'm still going to continue to bring it to the matches in case it's needed. But going forward, it's nice to know that it's not a crucial thing if I forgot it or something like that. And the last thing I have here in terms of lessons learned is just take your time to get settled. I think a lot of the stages I didn't get hits on were because I was really rushing through them. I had this mentality that I didn't want to time out on any of the stages, but I think it's actually better now to take your time, and even if you time out, you might get some really good hits where you wouldn't otherwise get if you're just rushing through the stages. My first match was a lot of fun, guys. Even though I didn't get a very high score, I ended up getting 12th of 16 shooters. That's both open and production class. I think I got dead last for the open class, which doesn't surprise me, to be honest, but I had a lot of fun. CZ457 again is shooting great. I'm going to be using it again in the upcoming February match that I've already signed up for. I already registered for that. The first match that I shot was a great experience, and now I'm basically hooked, you know. Anyway, this video series is going to be concluded now. I think this video is going to be by far the longest of any of them, so if you have stayed to the end here, I guess this stuff interests you, and I thank you for tuning in. I hope this series has been interesting and informative to anyone who's been following along. Again, I don't claim to be an expert. Obviously, this is showing my process in my first match, so I'm completely an amateur to this stuff, but I just thought I'd show the progress and preparation for these matches just to document it for anyone who may be interested. So thanks for watching again. I will try and do my best to answer any questions you can leave in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.